All right, welcome back everyone. It's 11:15, so we're going to go ahead and get started. It looks like we haven't had too many new folks join us, so I'm going to spare us all the Zoom tutorial. Thanks for your patience since I've offered that so many times over the last couple of days. And so I'm actually going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And I am now going to turn it over to Katie Harris and Aaron Suko, who are the owners and farmers behind Full Earth Farm right outside of Tallahassee. So Aaron and Katie, take it away.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Do you want to turn your video
Give us
on,
a
Katie?
second. Oh, sorry.
No worries.
Yes.
Yay, there they are.
Hi.
Hi.
Can people see our screen?
Yeah, looks great.
And are you seeing just the slide, or are you seeing?
We're seeing
Okay.
the thumbnails on the side. So if you hit present, we should just be able to see. There you go. Does that work for you all?
That works.
That looks good for us.
Yeah, it works for us. Just making sure.
All good.
Hi, everybody. In case you hadn't noticed, we've never done a Zoom workshop before. And this is actually kind of fun. So I'm Katie.
I'm Aaron.
And we run Full Earth Farm. So we didn't know if you'd be able to see us. So this is what we look like. We run Full Earth Farm, which started in 2009. We've been certified naturally grown since 2010, which is basically a non-government organic certification that's way more affordable for us and works well because we mostly sell directly to consumers, which means our customers know us, they trust us because of that relationship. I think if we were selling to more grocery stores, we would need a USDA certified organic label. We only grow vegetables. We started off the farm at about probably a quarter or a half acre and have grown into 5¼ acres as of this season. We have 5 employees, including us. So we have 3 full-time kind of manager type staff, including us, and 2 part-time employees. Our sales outlets include a CSA, which I know the last speaker was just talking about. We also participate in the Red Hills online market, the Saturday Tallahassee Farmers Market, and restaurants, and to the local food co-op in Tallahassee. So those are our outlets for sales. Some of that has changed with COVID, but that's still basically who we sell to. Creating systems has allowed us to increase, how much we're producing, how much we're able to move through our space, how much we're able to sell. It's also increased our quality, and it's made it possible for us to lower prices on certain products with still increasing profitability. So one of our goals is to be able to increase access to the produce that we grow, and part of that is making it more affordable. We're also going to be accepting SNAP payments as of this season. So, oh, I meant to show you this picture sooner. So these are some of the things we grow. Our season is October through June. The summer is when we typically take a break, just because it's so hot, and you just, being able to grow something year round is a blessing and a curse. So we force ourselves to take a break in the summer, regroup, and start again in the fall.
So when we talk about building systems, our goal in this case is increasing efficiency of operations on our farm. And then we look at a particular, area of operations on the farm, and in most vegetable operations, and by the way, we hope that most of our examples are based in our work, mixed vegetable production. We do also value-added product now as of this last season. So we think that even though most of these are vegetable specific, if most of what you do in your food or market business is value added, we'd still think that this general mindset and these principles are applicable in the kitchen or, food handling operation. It's basically logistics. We spend 50 to 60% of our labor, of our time, on harvesting, washing, and packing the produce. So even we just any steps we can make to streamline that part of the operation. We come out ahead in the long run. And so the goal, increase efficiency, we look at the workflow, like what is the largest sort of time suck? Like where is there other bottlenecks or wasted effort? And then come up with a plan of how to smooth that out to then reach our goal. And then the communication is what ties it all together and makes it possible. So communication, in our case, Katie and I work as a team, a sort of overall farm manager team. So we're constantly, we're married, so that's fairly easy, but you definitely need to be able to communicate with your business partner and your management and your crew. And since we're a small operation, we're on the ground and, out there in the dirt with everybody, working right alongside them most of the time. So a lot of things we just notice, but also as we've reached the point where we are, there are certain, part of getting to this point is we can break off and do the work that like only I can do or only Katie can do. And we know that we've got good systems in place where the crew can pretty much take care of it themselves. But then we, communicate with them on potential areas of improvement. And so we're going to go over a couple examples. And the first example is
before we go, I want to just point out that this is sort of it's a triangle, but it's repeating. And part of that is because as your business changes, this can't be linear. It's something you need to keep reevaluating and not just settling for a system that like works okay. So we had a system, we're going to show you mostly our wash and pack area because that's where we spend most of our time. And we had a system that worked really well for a long time, but we've gotten to a point with our growth that it suddenly wasn't working. So just to kind of reiterate that it's really important to be reassessing the goal all along the way so that you can continue to improve your workspace and that can translate into, better outcomes for your business. So this was our wash station for a long time. You can see the arrow starts at the top of the screen and then kind of follows a U shape, ending at the refrigerator, which is a walk-in fridge. We have one sink. The washing machine is where we would dry our salad greens, and we had a shelf in the middle for storing stuff. So the way this was set up was only one person could be washing at the sink and moving stuff along and then come to the next person, which worked really well for a long time. But over time, we realized these lightning bolts are bottlenecks. We had only one person able to wash and 4 other people sort of standing around for a little while. There's always like things that can be being done, but they're not always like essential at that moment. And so we felt like we were losing a lot of time by only having one place for people to wash stuff. And also we grow a lot of root crops and had the realization that if we had a better way to wash them, wash more at once, then that would be really awesome and we could grow more. But there wasn't really room for a wash station to accommodate that at this time, at this layout. So we did buy a root washer. This thing is super awesome. And, but we had to set it up outside. So there was kind of an ordeal to hook up, a long hose and an extension cord, and it was a little bit sketchy.
And bring it inside during hurricane season
right.
when we're not using it much and worried about trees falling on it. So and part of why we bought this in the first place was we have heavy Orangeburg clay soil that really sticks to the roots. I know growers in sandier parts of Florida where it's not quite as big a concern, but here we can pretty much sell more carrots than we can grow. And getting them clean was very time consuming, just spraying it with a nozzle by hand. And, going to conferences, learning from other growers, looking at different tools. We came onto the root tumbler as, the upfront sticker price. It's like, wow, that's shocking. Can we afford it? And when you look at what we've saved in time, it pretty much paid for itself in about a season and a half because we do 2 crops of carrots per year. And so this really helped our ability to bring more carrots to market, increase sales in that regard. But now we're redesigning our wash station. We want to bring this inside so it's even easier and more efficient to use. So this is the new plan, the new layout. We're working on it as we speak and going to have it ready in time for the big fall greens, beginning. And And it's similar to the other layout. It's just more capacity now. So we have two big stock tanks that we'll be using. We have the root tumbler inside now, plugged up, ready to go at any time we need it. The shelf is on casters now. You'll see later. It's on a paved surface, which is really key. We have as many things in there on wheels and pallets as possible to really facilitate moving large amounts of produce around with minimal effort, minimal wear and tear on our bodies and our crew's bodies. So stuff comes in. Now we have two dunk stations, and it can go into the tanks and into the fridge. So two people can be washing greens, one person can be running the root tumbler, and all of that is drastically gonna speed up our ability to wash larger volumes of produce.
Right, and so now we can turn the root washer on if we just have a couple of bins full of carrots, rather than feeling like we have to do, half the field today to justify turning on the root washer because it's such an ordeal. This should change the game. We're saying should because we're still have electrical to do. We've not used this new layout, but this is where we're at in the process. And I think for the most part, it's going to work really well. We're going to continue assessing our goal with this. Is it meeting the goal that we had? If not, what do we need to change? Some other things that we use a lot. So the gray box at the bottom represents a folding table. We have a bunch of those that we'll be setting up in this space. We're not exactly sure how yet, how it's all going to work in that way for packing, but we're really into things that are not permanent. So folding table, they're cheap. You can put it up, you can take it down, you can move it. We're all about that. It gives you a whole lot of options.
And to come up with our, improved design, we relied on, contacting other growers, seeing their operations, especially growers that operate on a larger scale than us, to see, how they do things more efficiently, but also just based off of our own observation on what was working and wasn't working about the previous setup, and some online sources. So there's it's very helpful to see what other growers are up to, and
it's also really important to have clear communication with your crew, both in designing this. We had a lot of input from them. They're the ones who are really washing. And so we were like, what sucks about this? What could be better? And together we designed this. So that was, I think, will end up being a really important part of it because they're going to come back and walk in the door and be ready to use it. So we're really into clear signage, but not too much. You don't want it to be I don't know if you've ever been to a laundromat and the whole place is plastered with rules. I don't want the farm to feel like that. I want it to be useful signage. So there's things like this pre-harvest checklist. We also have a post-harvest checklist. What this does for me is, first of all, we're making this thing that we do every week completely routine. We're going to be doing it the same way every time. There's slight differences depending on what crops we're harvesting, but pretty much it's the same list. So if we have something like this posted, it's really simple, but the impact long-term is huge. People don't have to memorize this list. If they're not sure what to be doing, they can just go look at the list, or if they ask me, I can just point. It takes up a lot of brain space to be memorizing so many things, and there's so many nuances with what we do. How much does the bucket weigh? How much does the lug weigh? How much, what do we need in the van when we're harvesting? If you just write it down and post it, that's really helpful.
And also you can use pictures, of what should go in the van, or pictures of what this particular workstation should look like when it's clean and ready. And then people can refer to that picture, to make the area look just like it is in the picture each time they're done using it, so it's ready to go. So pictures can be a good way to get that information across. I mean, you want to try to have the station designed in such a way that it's fairly obvious how it's meant to be used, but then there's always going to be some subtleties or question marks, and that's where you want to focus on your signage and not just have signage plastered all over the place.
Also, it's really important that you follow your own rules as management. If you set rules for others and then you don't follow them, then they're not going to happen. So, and to be really consistent, this is how we do it every single time. No excuses. You're always going to wash your hands, etc.
Do y'all want to take a couple questions, or do you want to hold questions until the end?
I can't see the chat. So
I'm watching the chat, so I can just read out the questions. We've got a couple that have come in. Mahindra is interested in a recommendation for the root washer.
Oh yeah. What is the name of that?
We have a resource list at the end, but we got this root tumbler from, pretty sure it's called Grindstone Farm. They're in upstate New York.
Grindstone.
And then there's
a lot of the other like tools and things we'll mention. There's a resource list at the end.
Yeah, great. And Katie, you sort of touched on it in terms of following your own rules, but Katie from Green Flamingo Organics asks, any tips on keeping up morale for your workers while harvesting all of those carrots?
Yeah, sometimes we play games. Sometimes we look for the weirdest carrot. You can listen to podcasts, things to help make the time pass. Something else to think about is fatigue, task fatigue that happens. I've heard people say, if a task takes longer than an hour and a half, it's kind of like cruel. We can't guarantee that every task is going to be done that quickly, but for longer tasks, I think it's really important to be working there with your crew alongside them so that they know you're both in it,
Or at least get them started and make it clear that there's other stuff that you have to peel off and get to, and check back in, so that there's not this kind of the big divide of crew thinking we do all the hard work, the boss is never here, what do they know? You need to be there, not 100% of the time, but you need to communicate and be around. And as far as like carrots in particular, no sitting flat on the ground at all. That is just absolutely not allowed on pretty much anything on our farm. Once people sit down flat on the ground, that's it. Like, they're going slow as slow can be, and morale, you got to split up and hustle and instill that sort of rule and explain why. You just automatically slow down. That's one thing we've kind of had to remind folks on, especially with carrots.
I think some tasks are just like that
just
too.
Get out there as early as you can and get as much of it done early in the day, not out in the middle of the afternoon.
And try to minimize those tasks. Yes, we have a huge carrot haul twice a year, but we're not doing it every week, and I think that can help with morale as well. Consolidate when you're doing that. So this is an example of our pick ticket. This is something that we use the same every week when we're harvesting, and it's useful in the moment, but it's also something we collect, and we use that data to figure out what our yields were for the year. And this season, we're finally going to be working with tracking labor to figure out our true cost of production. And that's something that is really essential if you want to get into wholesale, which we're not going to talk about. But some of the things that we found and we recommend to new growers all the time is, when you're buying supplies for your farm, buy agriculture specific products if you can afford them. For example, the bins in the bottom middle of the screen, these are called lugs, L-U-G-S. That vocabulary is really helpful when you're searching for these things. But they stack on top of each other and they nest inside of each other. These are the only bins that we're using for harvest on the farm, with the exception of buckets during the spring. And the reason for that is they're sturdy. They're going to last a really long time. They're meant to do this work. They're pretty expensive up front, but long term, they're cheaper than the Rubbermaids we had been using, because those would break every year. So we feel like this has been a huge, really like a game-changing investment for us, because when we were using a bunch of different size bins, we had to, again, like memorize the weight of that Rubbermaid versus this other one, with the lid, without the lid, the bucket. It's just like takes up a lot of useful space in my brain that I could use for something else. So that reason alone is a really good reason to be like, just standardize all of your bins, make them all the same weight, no matter what kind you're getting. You don't have to get these, but we love these. And you can see the bottom right photo is kind of a side view of our van packed for delivery. We can pack so much food in the van by using bins that can stack on top of each other. The bins on the top, these kind of like giant Gaylords, Aaron built these on top of pallets with the purpose of bringing them out to the field with the tractor. We lift the bags of potatoes in there one time, and then we take it into the barn where there's a pallet jack waiting so we can move it around with wheels. And that minimizes the amount of times we're picking up these really heavy bags of potatoes and moving them around.
So yeah, and this is, wheels are essential in logistics and lifting and moving things around. Put as many things on wheels as you possibly can. Ideally, we're still fairly small scale, but, and I would love it if our barn was set up for forklift access, because that would allow us to expand even more. And eventually we might have to do something in that regard. But at 5¼ acres, being able to at least get the tractor in there and drop a crate down and then move it around from there with a hand truck is crucial. And so the paved floor is a real important part of this. A lot of places that that are on dirt floors, other options you could think about are forklift attachments on the tractor, but also garden carts for moving things around, and even consider getting some quotes on having a hard surface put down, because in the not too long term, it'll more than pay for itself in just efficiency and reduced chance for injury and spilled product. And it's just makes a lot cleaner, safer environment for moving heavy items around easily.
And then the cart on the right with our, again, green bins on there, we have a handful of these. They're called boats that we move all around. We put dirty stuff on there, we wheel it over to the wash station. Then we have clean bins that we put on there and we wheel it into the fridge. Everything's on wheels. We are obsessed with wheels. It's like the best invention. So
yeah, the wheels, the alphabet, levers, all these sort of like Stone Age, technologies or whatever, they really go a long way and are often overlooked, especially on small farms.
Yeah, don't reinvent the wheel. It's perfect. So there's some small changes that you can make right away that can make a big difference. And here's an example. We used to, I'm embarrassed to say, till really recently, we used to harvest loose leaves, kale for example, into a bin, and we'd be really anal about them all facing the same direction. And then when they're washed, you better keep them in the same direction. And then we're gonna weigh them out and be super precise, and it took forever.
So everybody gets a very precise bunch at market or in the CSA. Well, we got over that.
Get over it. Bunch in the field. What you're going to have is it's going to be so much faster. Your bunches will probably be slightly bigger, which for the customer is sweet. But what we've done, I was really worried about our staff being able to make the change. I was worried about training, and I think that's why we hadn't done it. We had done it with roots before, but now we're doing it with anything that's bunched. We bunch it in the field. And it's not a big deal. Training is not a big deal. You make a sample bunch, you hand it out, and you say, this is your sample. You can bring a scale with you in the field just to, if people feel like they need to test a couple bunches to get a feel for it, and then just go. This has been amazingly better. I'm like stunned at how much better it is. So this is just a small example. This didn't cost us any money. We didn't have to invest anything. We just had to change our habit. We didn't have the whole layout of how we do, like our workflow of our CSA, but we just wanted to show you. We just set up an assembly line. We have boxes. One of our biggest CSA pickups is at Whole Foods, which is pretty cool. They let us use that facility and they hand out all our CSAs for us. But we put them in boxes. We have 2 shares per bag. We set up an assembly line. They get 1 of each thing or whatever the thing is that week. And then because they're in boxes, we can again stack them on top of each other, use that vertical space, fill the van, put it on a boat at Whole Foods, stick it in their fridge. And that's actually allowed us to increase our CSA by quite a lot by, first of all, working with Whole Foods, but then also using these boxes to stack as much food as possible into the van.
And we did go with the wax cardboard boxes over like a reusable plastic tote in this instance. For several reasons, but one of the issues with reusable totes you got to think about is time spent on cleaning them, and the time especially on any food handling operation, time and wasted effort can really hurt you. Like on a farm, yes, of course we have to take care of the soil and we have to use water properly and nutrients properly, but in my own experience and visiting other small farms, what I see the most waste is in time and labor. So when it comes down to, this one option is a little bit more expensive up front to buy reusable plastic totes versus throwaway wax coated boxes. But if you think about, how many hours are you going to spend on those totes cleaning them out versus these boxes take up less space when they're empty. We have, an arrangement with Whole Foods where they break them down and save them for us, because everything is in a liner bag in there, so the boxes stay pretty clean. And if they start to get messed up or they start to fall apart after 5 or 6 uses, we throw them in the compost heap.
Yeah, so we are reusing these, but also if we were taking these expensive plastic totes to Whole Foods, they go missing.
Yeah, so it's like, if a lot of us in the sustainable farming world, we have this environmental consciousness, but we also need to think about labor efficiency as well. And sometimes reusable isn't always 100% of the time the best option. You got to think about all these other factors.
We've got a couple questions in the chat.
Okay, good, because we're about to switch gears.
Great. So in terms of bunching in the field, there's a question about, is the weight per bunch approximate? And I guess I'm wondering, how do y'all wash things once they're already bunched? And then we have some questions about Whole Foods.
Sure. So bunching in the field, yeah, it's an approximate weight. What we're trying to teach people is to figure out what it feels like in your hand. Kale greens all kind of feel the same, and then roots are heavier, obviously. So with roots, you can do it by the count if you want. If you have consistent sized beets or turnips or something, you could say, oh, there's 4 to a bunch, that's a bunch. With kale, for me, it's like a handful. I have little hands. And it's just another way of teaching yourself a muscle memory for that crop. And that's why we'll bring a scale into the field and we'll say, we're aiming for a half pound.
So yeah, everybody have them pick a sample bunch, their own sample bunch. And then they go from there off of just the feel of it and like the circumference of it in their hand. Different, some people have smaller hands than others, so that's why you want to do. It's a good idea to start with a scale at least to try to get, to have them all sort of within 5 to 10% of each other, and not have one bunch be twice as big as everything else.
Yeah, so there's that. And then for washing, you just wash it the same way. Dunk it, and you shake it around in the water, and same thing.
If we wash them at all, I mean, if late in the season when the collards are super tall and dirt's not getting splashed on them, or if you grow on plastic, you don't necessarily have to wash them at all, but we typically will dunk them, and that's with salad stuff, it goes into a tank with a bubbler, and the bubbler action helps get some more of the dirt down in there out.
Yeah.
Cool. And then we had a couple questions about the relationship with Whole Foods. Why did Whole Foods partner with you? Did they do it for free? And what sort of paperwork was involved in setting up that relationship?
Yeah, in some ways I'm hesitant to mention it because every farm I talk to is like, what? They've never heard of such a thing. It's a pretty special, I guess. I didn't realize it was such a special relationship. We know people that work at Whole Foods. We know some of the people that helped open the store, so maybe that made it a little easier to get our foot in the door. We're not the only farm that has done this in Tallahassee. Orchard Pond also did it for a while. But yeah, it's free. They let us, we just come every Thursday. We drop off our boxes. We drop off a checklist at the front desk, and that's it. And their staff goes and gets the shares for them. They are really awesome. And I think because it's still, even though it's a national chain, it's a local store with local people that we've known through our relationships, agriculture, and also I grew up here. They're really excited to have local food in there at all, because it's really hard for small growers to actually get on the shelves at Whole Foods. So this is sort of a like workaround to get local food in the door.
And part of it could be, I mean, I've heard of this happening in other Whole Foods locations. I don't think it's a corporate nationwide thing, because you think in big cities, there's no way they're going to be able to offer this because it's so crowded. But when this Whole Foods opened here, also like 2 other nationwide chain stores kind of in that same realm were opening right around the same time. So I think Whole Foods was, trying to get trying to get in good with the local population as a marketing strategy, you know. But it works for us, and it's been a good relationship. Like the only sort of caveats are pretty simple. Like they don't want us putting
we don't have a meat share, but if we did, we couldn't put it in the bags because of liability of having meat in the vegetable fridge, stuff like that.
and I'm pretty sure it's like they just want produce in there. They don't want value added or meat in there. You know, it's just the produce. So in our case, in this situation, it's worked pretty well. I mean, it might be worth contacting, I don't know, the produce manager or the general store manager where you are to see if that's even an option. Because like I said, I've heard of it in other locations, but I know it's not necessarily at every single location.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, y'all. And then there's one last question, and then I think whatever other questions roll in, we can hold them to the end because we have about 15 minutes. So Mahindra is wondering, what is your timeline for harvesting greens? So the timeline from harvest to market for greens specifically.
Oh, so we harvest Wednesday morning for Thursday deliveries. That would be our CSA, online market, any restaurants. And then it's pretty much we harvest one day, we deliver the next day, whether it be the farmer's market or other outlets.
So stuff gets chilled down in the walk-in cooler for close to 24 hours before it's delivered.
Yeah.
Groovy. All right, so we have about 15 minutes, and folks, you're welcome to keep putting your questions in the chat, and we'll just hold them towards the end. All right, thanks, Katie and Aaron.
And so
yeah.
Part of how we got to having that bottleneck in the wash station is because we were working on improving our systems in the field with planting, cultivation, just basic crop planning and maintenance. So we had this, you know, more stuff that we were growing and selling that bottlenecked in the wash station. So now we're talking a little bit about those field systems.
Yeah, we're not going to get into it super deep because this is too short a session, but Tend is an app that we started using a few years ago just to organize our planting schedule for the whole season. I can sit down and knock it out in a couple days, just everything I want to plant for the whole fall and winter season. I did that back in May or June. And what this does is it keeps me organized. It helps me know how many seeds to order, where plants are going, and when to plant them. So it creates task lists. I, again, don't have to be thinking constantly about task lists. This tool costs a little bit of money. We feel like it's worth it. We still use paper calendars and everything, but this tool for me has just freed up so much of my time to be able to do other stuff.
And
so,
we also have a field map that's just a drawing, a diagram on a whiteboard in the barn. And whether you're doing like great rotational grazing or vegetables orchard, you need to have a field map up where you and your crew can see it and refer to it all the time, so that that just becomes ingrained. Like, okay, field A, field B, field C, block A1, A2, you just refer to these parts of the farm where that job needs to get done, and not stand there for 10 minutes trying to explain, oh, you go about, 200 yards out, hang a left at that tree, and then, where those carrots are, remember those carrots? Like, no, its address is field C, block 7. Do it, bam, just go get it done. Like,
yeah. So Aaron, a lot of what Aaron does is field prep and bed prep. So we're in communication about, okay, this field's gonna have carrots in it. They need to be planted by this date. Get it ready for me. And so we've created systems to make this possible.
So the systematizing your bed layout is very important. You want to have as little deviation as possible. In our case, we use 4 high tunnels, and the beds in there are a little narrower just to make better use of that. We call that the high rent district in the high tunnel, because the extra materials and labor involved in building and maintaining the high tunnels. We grow like high value, quick turnaround crops in there. And then in the field, we have another standard bed width that's based on the width, our tractor, the wheels of our tractor. And then within that, the rows, there's a lot that can be done on smaller scale operations to streamline your planting efficiency based on simple hand tools even. And we're sort of kind of in this in between because of the scale of our operation, where we do some things with hand tools, we do some things with tractor mounted tools. Just, the right tool for the job can go a really long way. And in the picture on the right, you see a grid laid out and lettuce transplants. And that gritter is something I just built looking online. But now since I built that, there are multiple sources online for buying a tool like that ready to roll and use right in your operation. And it helps not only yourself, but especially with your crew, just go out there, mark the bed, plant the crop, the right spacing, parallel, even rows. And the planting is gonna happen so fast. And then you'll be able to come through at cultivation time and keep the weeds in check. And then at harvest time, stuff is spaced evenly. It's going to grow a lot more evenly and be quicker and easy to harvest because you're keeping the weeds in check, because your rows are parallel, because you can get in there with a wheel hoe or your tractor. It's just this really basic, step that just has this ripple effect down the road. And we make cheat sheets for these different tasks, like for plantings, we have head lettuce, spinach, different crops in the high tunnel that have slightly different spacing requirements. So make a cheat sheet that says, spinach, it's a 4-row crop. This is the spacing. Head lettuce, this is a 3-row crop. This is the spacing, and have that, clipped together and hanging up where you keep your tools for that job. Like the row marker and the cultivation tools, it's hanging there. And then most, likely if you're the head farmer, that all that stuff is just ingrained in you. But
again, you don't want to be thinking about it all the time.
But it helps to just have a cheat sheet to refer to, so you don't have to stop and scratch your head and try to remember. And then it's even better when you have help, refer to the cheat sheet, and they can just go out and get the job done while you can be working on the manager stuff. Or we like to all take tea breaks together, but every now and then I'll sneak away and take a little tea break by myself while the crew's out there getting a job done. And then I'll sneak back out and get on the tractor. It's quality of life as well as just getting the job done.
Well, and you're empowering your staff and saying, I trust you to do this job.
Yeah, I think that goes a long way too, like being able to hand things off. Well, the cultivation is also another area spent, a lot of time and labor spent on the farm. There are different options, using plastic mulch is another way that a lot of growers in especially Central and South Florida do, in sandy soil. We have a heavy clay. The mulch can be tricky getting the timing just right for laying it with moisture. It really retains the moisture, this clay soil. So we kind of do most of our spring crops on a biodegradable film, but most of our fall winter crops we do plant on bare ground and rely on cultivation to get a good crop through. And so that was an area on our farm that takes a lot of time and effort. And over time, by improving, just starting off with, like I said, basic hand tools, marking your rows straight, getting a wheel hoe, having the right width blade to get in there and cultivate. But then also, we ended up getting this cultivating tractor. Like, it's something that we wanted for years and weren't ready to do, or we didn't like the available options on the market. But last year, this Tillmore cultivating tractor finally came out, and we ended up going for it because we felt like all the changes we made to systematize our bed prep and planting and cultivation, and with tools we had on hand, we felt like we were ready to take full advantage of this specialty tractor. Whereas, if we were still just doing things kind of willy-nilly and poorly organized, and then we just buy this new tractor, it's not going to transform our operation for us overnight. Like, we had to be ready to actually put something like this to use. So that's what I say, like, there's so much that you can do even with just what you have, or the right hand tools, let alone, like mechanizing as you scale up.
And this is why we say long-term goal. Like, we've wanted to work toward this, and that's what we've done over time, is work toward being ready for this tool when it became available. So when we got it, we hit the ground running and could use it right away. And one thing that's been a surprise, it shouldn't have been a surprise, is we've been able to widen our bed top, and on some crops that were 3 rows are now 4 rows. So there's a 30% increase on the same footprint. So that's pretty cool. One last thing we wanted to say was, we wanted to start this fermented food line for years, but we've just not been able to. And a lot of the changes that we've made in the past couple years have made this possible. We've freed up our own time to be able to tackle this project, which we actually have just launched sauerkraut this past winter, and we're about to launch some kimchi and hot sauce this fall. And just to get to the point where we could even legally make the sauerkraut has been like the most painful process ever. If any of you went to the workshops yesterday about food safety, this is not a cottage foods thing. We've been dealing with Department of Ag. We hired a consultant, which we wanted to just say, if you're out of your comfort zone with something on your business and you don't know how to do it, but you want to just muscle through it, hire someone that knows about it. Hire a professional. You could probably hire somebody to help you solve problems in your business. They could help you solve it so much faster than you could, and long-term that investment would probably be worth it. We've also hired a consultant for the farm this season to help us with some soil fertility issues, and it's rocked my world. So this is all just to kind of say that by building these systems, we have increased efficiency on the farm and been able to add a value-added product to our lineup, which is exciting. We couldn't have done that if we were not organized.
And some of these improvements, you know, like how are you going to finance them if you're strapped for capital? There's a lot you can do, especially if you're smaller scale. So a lot of the good hand tools for getting a job done, you know, you can get in the $50 to $400 range. So there's things that you can do with GoFundMe and campaigns like that among your customer base to try to raise some capital to fund some of these things if that's a problem. The larger, you know, things like the tractor, we had to get a loan and we're, you know, paying that off over time. But because of the increase in efficiency, it's essentially paying for itself each month in terms of labor savings and increase in crop yields. So the upfront sticker price on a lot of things can be daunting, but there's ways of getting there, you know, step at a time. And especially like, even, you know, there's a lot of buzz around CSA, and I think part of that is not necessarily people signing up ahead of time to get a box of food every week. I mean, think about expanding that notion into, like, you know, crowdsourcing funding for capital improvements. Another thing I really and think there's a lot of potential, especially in the small farm space and small, you know, kitchen space, is grouping together to form microloan associations. And that's something that we're kind of talking about and looking into in our area. We're not there yet, but, you know, you can start with small steps financially and make big, you know, get big results.
So this is a long list of things. If you want to take a screenshot, or I guess, Rachel, you'll send this out. One of the things I wanted to say is recommended reading. The Lean Farm by Ben Hartman the lean is a concept developed in Japan, I think in the Toyota factory, of how basically exactly what we talked about, minimizing wasted effort. It's very theoretical. Working Clean is a mise en place. It's a book about mise en place, which really has to do with kitchen spaces. And I've actually, disclaimer, never read this book, but another farmer in Vermont told me that she loves these two books together. She said she felt like the Working Clean book kind of put the Lean Farm ideas into action. So it's a book that I look forward to reading as soon as I can get to it. Other good reading material, Growing for Market, is all about this exact industry that we're in. It's really helpful. And the Start Your Farm book by Ellen and Forrest is really good. So make sure you take a screenshot of something of this list if it's interesting to you. And otherwise, we'll take questions.
Cool. Thanks, y'all. Yeah, if folks have questions, you're welcome to go ahead and put them in the chat. We had a couple questions that came up when we were still talking about your greens.
Because we did in that one, if we just put the pipe up and put the heads there, you only get irrigation on half of it because the other half runs right into the plastic and then drips down.
Right, where we're trying to avoid that.
Yeah, so there, if we can put the pipes up.
I wonder if Tracy's not actually talking to us. It sounds like Tracy might be having a separate conversation. So in terms of when we were talking about greens earlier, there's a question, is it important to cool down the greens like between harvest and getting them to market? And then how are you packaging those greens? And then if other folks have other more general questions, you're welcome to put those in the chat and we can lift those up as well.
Yeah, one thing we didn't talk about was how much having a walk-in refrigerator changed things in ways we didn't expect on the farm. One of those things was we'd been using coolers with ice before going to market. So it's really important you cool your greens down before you send them wherever they're going, unless you're doing that very immediately. But we found that by using refrigeration, we thoroughly cooled everything, and the shelf life's way longer and it lasts way longer at market just being out. We don't bag our bunched greens like kale and collards. They're just bunched and we just have them out. Yeah, but we've seen a huge difference in quality by using refrigeration that thoroughly cools the products. We do pre-bag like loose salad mix and stuff like that, but of course we're trying to minimize how much we're using plastic as much as possible.
All right. Anybody want to come off mute? Any last questions before we wrap things up? Cool. All right. Well, oh, go ahead.
I have a question. I'm very impressed with the presentation from Katie and Aaron. Do you have any like volunteer work kind of like learning at your farm?
We do. We don't have any kind of like formal internship program. We've talked about it. And COVID, of course, is making that a little complicated. But if you'd like to contact us, fullearthfarm@gmail.com, we could talk about it further.
Yeah, we have 3 ourselves plus 3 paid employees, and part of what's really important about a farm business for us is we need to pay, like we need to make a living wage, but we need to pay our employees as best or better than a living wage. And to get to that point, it's taken us time, but we've gotten to the point now where we're at least got everybody on a local living wage, and our goal is to go up from there. Like I think it's a travesty that agricultural workers are exempt from minimum wage, and as a society, to me, that's unacceptable. And so if I can't manage to pull that off or better on my operation, then I'm just like, I'm not doing it right. So we don't, it's tricky because volunteer is a way to learn a lot. But to me, it's essential that people are getting paid. And so we have had people start as volunteers and then we hire them. We've had some people just come once a week, but we're focused more and more on having like good paid labor and being able to pay people better to keep them coming back. Like ultimately that's our long-term goal.
Yeah, there's a ton of turnover with this industry, and we're trying to create an environment where that's less of, we want it to be a career for other people too, not just us.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Katie and Aaron.